I kind of like it. Oh no! Ladies and gentlemen, gentlemen and ladies, ladies and gents, welcome, 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 welcome. I decided to let that play. I'm gonna have to shut down this window for a second. Give me a second. Gotta get rid of that. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome, welcome, welcome. I gotta talk to you guys about something. Something. Ladies and gentlemen, get rid of that now. There is a subject that is talked about that is shied away from by so many. I believe that it is misguided, misdirected, and sending people along the wrong route. I believe that so many people have the wrong concept because they're mixing two things together that don't belong together. Let me make sure everybody understands where I'm coming from. I don't take sides. I could care less. I don't vote because I could care less. I am one of Jehovah's Witnesses. It is not my job to take sides. Do I have an opinion? Of course I do. You've listened to me. Yes, see, I got an opinion. I got an anus just like everybody else. Okay? So I'm going to voice my opinion this one time. One time on the RedressRight channel. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to talk about, wait. Many of you guys are going to misunderstand. I promise you, you're going to appreciate the conversation at the end, not at the beginning, because we're going to talk about racism and slavery, how they are not the same thing. Say what? What you talking about, Willis? Racism and slavery are not the same thing. So why is it when they bring up slavery, they bring up racism? They are not the same thing. Do you think the people who had the so-called Africans as slaves, that they were racist? Come on now, y'all need to rethink this. Stop letting them mix racism and slavery. Those are two separate ideas, two separate attitudes, two separate conducts. They are not the same thing. Everybody who has slaves doesn't mean they're racist. So why are you guys allowing them to confuse the two? I don't need to pull up no definition for racism and definition for slavery. Y'all know better than that. Stop letting these fools dictate. I got something I want to show y'all. We're going to go to the Brave browser. This is a hearing. Now, I want y'all to understand something. First, even though he speaks on behalf of reparations, the reparations would be for slavery, not for racism. Hold on now. Go back and think about it. But you're going to hear them talk about racism. You're going to hear them say reparations don't do anybody any good. Well, they didn't say that to the Japanese who were in the internment camps. They didn't say that to the Chinese who were in the internment camps, did they? They didn't say that to the Jews who were allegedly Holocaust. They've been compensated. Did you say allegedly? No, the Holocaust did happen. I told you I'm one of Jehovah's Witnesses. Jehovah's Witnesses in those concentration camps by Hitler were called purple diamonds. The Holocaust did happen. However, the Holocaust of 6 million? Impossible. That number could not be mathematically probable. Just go ahead and do the math. No matter how many so-called ovens Hitler had, no matter if he was running them 24 hours a day and had enough natural gas to keep that junk going, could he have done such? Why? Because he would have been focused so much on just that he would not have been able to continue the war effort. Impossible. You see, that's 6 million, so that means you need several 100,000 of your military personnel guarding the 6 million. Go ahead. Go ahead. Look at the population of the jail. There are 2.3 million people in jail in America. 2.3 million at least. And look at the several 100,000 guards. Okay? So let me say it again. He would have had to devote too much time to guarding and destroying and killing. Doesn't matter what your opinion is. The math does not add up. So we're going to leave that part alone. I'm not here to say whether or not this happened or that happened. I don't know what the numbers are. I don't know. All I know is that they received reparations for what somebody in another country did. And the United States were the ones who were behind making sure they received reparations. But when it comes to slavery, they want to say racism. Oh no, you can't penalize the people today for the racism that was done before. It ain't about racism. We're not penalizing the taxpayers today. It's the corporations and the United States government that needs to be penalized. Well, not everybody back then sponsored racism. Not everybody back then had slaves. No, but they capitulated. They condoned it. They participated in one way or another. By their silence, it equates to admittance. Go ahead and look at the principles of law. If one has a duty to speak and fails to do so, that individual is guilty. Sorry, it's not my principle. I did not create it. Silence equates to acquiescence. I didn't say that, ladies and gentlemen. The stupid United States Supreme Court said that. But they say, wait a minute, one race of people. It's not a race of people. Ladies and gentlemen, being a person of color is not a race. Don't people understand that? It's not all persons of color who were slaves. So why are they making it about race? Because they can convolute the subject. So let me help you out. Minority. I don't know what she is, but she don't look like she even want to be there. So I'm going to let him talk for a second. I'm going to be quiet. I might chime in a couple of times. Y'all know me. But I need the so-called Republican from Louisiana. You know, a slave state. You know, the state that had slavery. We need him to speak because he's an expert on racism. Watch this. He is even going to talk about having a child at the age of 14 that he took off the street that was headed to a life of nowhere that he took in because he had to be Captain Sable. He had to be the white rescuer. I want you all to pay attention to who's leading this reparation hearing. I want you to pay attention to everybody who's speaking. Now, Danny Glover is going to be speaking, and so is Mr. Coates, sorry. But we're not going to listen to them. We're going to listen to the slave owners talk first. You heard what I said. We're going to listen to the slave owners. Oh, you guys didn't understand? This has nothing to do with white and black. Because there were black slave owners. What? What, you didn't know? Told you this is not about racism. There were black slave owners. Do your research. Some people are going to use that to their advantage. I apologize. Again, this is not about race. This is about slavery. This is about enslaving people, even though the law of the United States, the common law, said no one was to be subjected to involuntary servitude. You know it now as the so-called 13th Amendment. It was already part of the Northwest Ordinance. It was already the law. Slavery was already outlawed in the United States from its inception. People of color were already considered people. But you know, they changed it. Why? That's what people do. I'm going to let them talk now. You guys, let's give them a listen. Go ahead, close your mouth.
Disparity. For instance, African Americans continue to face discrimination in the workplace. They have limited access to educational opportunities. According to the National Education Association, the high school education rate, graduation rate for African Americans was 67% compared to the nationwide average of 81%.
Hold on. You see, he's talking about African Americans. He's talking about a quote-unquote race that they created. He's not talking about the children, the descendants of former slaves. He's talking about African Americans. Why? Because that's a civil rights name. Don't believe me? Go back to 1964. They were called the Negroes. Then they changed it to African Americans. So he's using a slavery non-term to detract and distract people from the slavery term. Descendants of slaves is what he should be saying, but he's not doing that. There are no statistics on that. Why? Because they don't. Why? Because they're going to talk to you about how bad that history is. They don't want to talk about slavery. Why? Because there is no excuse for it. Hold on. Wait. What do you mean there's no excuse for it? They don't have an excuse. There's nothing in the law. They made it acceptable in the past. The Supreme Court supported it in the past. Do you know that if they admitted slavery was wrong? Now got to go back and look. 2009, I believe it was, Congress admitted that slavery was wrong, but they took no responsibility for it. So yeah, slavery is wrong. But, you know, when we did it, you know, that was years ago, so we ain't focused on that. We focus on now. Slavery is wrong now. No. You see, they have not admitted that what they've done was wrong, but they want everybody else to admit what they've done was wrong. Let's continue.
African Americans also continue to face racial segregation in housing and discrimination.
Ladies and gentlemen, did you hear him again? Racial segregation, discrimination in housing. They've made it about race. It has nothing to do with race. I was having a conversation today with someone about being discriminated against. And I've said this before, and I'll say to you all again. Racism is not a feeling. You can't feel discriminated against. You are either discriminated against or you are not. But slavery, you can't feel that you're a slave. You were either a slave or you were not. Do you understand? These are finite issues. These are not, oh, well, it depends on your perspective. You know, because the slaves were treated better than dogs and cats and animals and everything, and they were fed and they were given room and board. You remember, they used to say that. They used to justify it by making it seem like, oh, well, it wasn't that bad. Aw, Lord have mercy.
And the availability of quality health care service and most other major facets of life. Enacting H.R. 40 would be an important step in finding effective long-term solutions to these problems, ones that can trace their origins to our nation's shameful.
Wait, hold on. Now they have made it to where now you have to prove that you're a descendant. You see, if they had done this back in the 1800s, then there would be no reason for this. If they had done it in the early 1900s, there'd be no reason for this. If they had done it in the 60s, there'd be no reason for this. In the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, there would be no reason for this. But now they say you have to prove that you're a descendant of a slave. Did you hear that? You have to prove. Now, see, I can prove that. I can show you that my ancestors were slaves in Kentucky. On my grandmother's side, my mama's family, her father and her mother's father, my grandfather's father and my grandmother's father on my mother's side, both from Kentucky. My father, his father's father, and my grandmother on my father's side, father's father, Kentucky. The fact that they each ended up in Louisiana is unique. But what are the chances? So we can prove that. We have that history. But what about the people who don't have that history? You put the onus on them? They have to prove? Why do they have to prove? Why can't you have the burden of proof? Why can't you have the burden of proof? But of course, they don't want the burden of proof. They want to make it more difficult. Look, ladies and gentlemen, I want to tell you, look at her. This woman does not want to be there. Look at her face. He's ignoring everything. He's just there for the ride. Because it means nothing to him, it means nothing to her. Let's continue.
History of slavery and anti-black racism. As the distinguished Professor Charles Ogletree of Harvard Law School once noted, the concept of reparations does not necessarily mean payments to individuals, but rather a
Excuse me, wait a minute. Ladies and gentlemen, reparations means exactly that. It means redress. It means correcting the wrong. It means compensation for the wrong. It means righting a wrong. Go and look at the word reparation and you will see what it means. But he's saying this so-called person of color from Harvard is supposed to be the expert. They don't speak for me. They don't speak for you. They don't even speak for anybody who is not a descendant of a former slave. They can only speak for themselves. I didn't give them permission to speak for me. They haven't asked me if it was okay to voice their opinion. I love you, TFO. How dare you voice your opinion? Skeezer snatcher, big disease catcher, gonna get you, gotcha. Don't blame it on your father. You told me that you love them. Blame it on your mothers. All 5 of them. Okay, that's split personality. At least my version of it. Ladies and gentlemen, I am so sick and tired of people saying that somebody represents me. Martin Luther King did not represent me. I want to let y'all know I was getting ready to do an intro, and I really was getting ready to do it, and I'm still going to do it, but it's not going to be the way I want it. And I was going to have Martin Luther King talking about, I have a dream that one day, and while he's speaking, hey you, get off my mountain. I've been to the mountaintop. Hey you, you know. And then I was going to have, ain't no mountain high enough. And it was all going to be a parody on Martin Luther King's He's Been to a Mountaintop. Now, although he's talking about the mountain that Moses went to. Now, what you guys don't understand, pay attention to the I Have a Dream speech. The mountain he's saying on, remember, Moses could not go into the promised land. He could only watch it from a distance. That's why he says, I've been to the mountaintop. The Lord allowed me to see the promised land. But I may not get there with you. He's saying he's about to die. See, he's been to the mountaintop. Moses didn't come down off the mountain. Moses died up on the mountain. He did not come down off that mountain. He never stepped foot back on the ground below the mountain. He died on top of the mountain. Martin Luther King was saying exactly that. He knew he was going to die. That's what he's saying. Go back and listen. That's what he's referring to. But he didn't represent me. He didn't speak for me. I didn't even know the man. And I don't care what he did. He did not help me. He helped the people of that time, the people to whom he was trying to help, but none of what he did has helped me. It didn't make things better for me. Why? Because we're in the same boat they were in the 60s, just a different color. It's the same boat, has the same holes, and has no maintenance, and it still has the barnacles. The same boat sitting in the middle of the ocean trying to find somebody who's going to help us get to shore. If you don't understand what I just said, go back and look at the 60s and notice that we're in the same exact situation. Nothing has changed. The police, every police department is the descendants, not of the sheriff's department. Sheriff's department have been around for centuries. The police department has been around since slavery. They are the former spook hunters. They went and they hunted slaves. They looked for runaway slaves. So when you tell me, when you say that the United States, the corporations and the leaders, the congressmen, the senators, the politicians are not responsible for the conduct of that day, that their descendants are not responsible if they're continuing to profit off of slavery. And there are many companies that are out there, including the United States as a corporation, all profiting off of slavery. Look at Louisiana, an entire state. Mississippi, Florida, Alabama, Texas, all profiting off of slavery. I went to Louisiana and I saw that the way the people were being treated. And I'm like, you out of your mind. So I had this conversation today. That's why this conversation is readily on my mind. I had this conversation today with a guy I could tell by his accent that he was not from America. He was not a so-called descendant of slaves in America. He may be a descendant of slaves in Africa, but not a descendant of slaves in America. He's an immigrant. He's not from here. His accent gave him away. Ladies and gentlemen, I could tell he was a person of color. But I can tell he has no concept of discrimination in America. I could tell he has no concept of discrimination from the standpoint of someone who is from here. Does that help him? No, that helps the company for whom he works for, because that makes them look like they are disparity. They are hiring persons of color because they're focused on racism. They're focused on color. Racism is not hating a person because of their skin color, ladies and gentlemen. Racism is hating a person because they're not slaves anymore. Racism is hating a person because you can't control them anymore. We're talking about racism in America. There's a difference with racism in America and racism in a different country. Racism is in America is about control. Has nothing to do with color of skin. If you don't believe me, sit back and think about it. Go back and look at every book, every single complaint, and it's about somebody trying to exercise control over another. Why do you think they were hanging persons of color? Because they could not control them. They could not make them do what they wanted them to do. Ladies and gentlemen, racism is about control. Don't believe me? Listen.
Focused on the poorest of the poor, including efforts, quote, to address comprehensively the problems of those who have not substantially benefited from integration or affirmative action, unquote. I hope our hearing today can lead to fruitful conversations with the aim of achieving that goal. I thank our witnesses for being here today and look forward to their testimony. It is now my pleasure to recognize the ranking member of the subcommittee, the gentleman from Louisiana, Mr. Johnson, for his opening statement. Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me start today by saying I maintain.
Hold on. Louisiana. He's the ranking member. Interesting, ain't it? Because you couldn't put a person of color as a ranking member. Why? Because optics wouldn't look good. So who do you put there? You put a seemingly young individual, and guess what? He's got a son, adoptive, that is a person of color. That's what you do. Now, listen to him.
Maintain the utmost respect for my colleagues on the other side, and I know their beliefs on this issue are sincerely held. I want to thank all.
Wait, hold on. You heard him say beliefs? because they want to make it seem like it's a belief and it's not a fact. Ladies and gentlemen, slavery was a fact. It's not a belief. I don't believe in slavery. What do you mean you don't believe in slavery? He's saying beliefs. They're going to focus on racism.
Call our witnesses for being here today, for your good faith testimony and your scholarship. We've all read through it in detail and made many notes. I'll use my brief time here to just focus on an overview of what H.R. 40 is and why we're here. What we're going to discuss here today centers upon a regrettable and shameful portion of American history. Slavery in America and elsewhere was a horrific injustice, the perpetuation of which was antithetically opposed to the founding ideals expressed in our Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, including its Bill of Rights. Of course, the evil institution of slavery was legally abolished over 150 years ago on December 6, 1865, via ratification of the 13th Amendment, following the end of the tragic Civil War. The bill today, H.R. 40, would, quote, establish a commission to study and develop reparation proposals for African Americans. There are serious questions about this from all sides of the political spectrum, and they're honest and sincere questions that we want.
Now, they were going to just do a study associated with African Americans, again, not about slavery, about race. They made it about race. It has nothing to do with slavery. The descendants of slaves, let me explain something, if those of you who are still here and who are paying attention. The descendants of slaves, no education. Why? Because they couldn't get into school. They couldn't get a proper education. Why? Because of their skin color. Oh, that was racism, huh? Yes, that's racism. But not just because of their skin color, because they were former slaves. Remember, in the North, and if you look at 12 years a slave, you will see that there were educated persons of color who've been to college, who worked in very well, highly esteemed professions. It was not about race, people. It was about being a former slave. That's why 12 years a slave, the young man was not a slave. But because of his skin color, they presumed he was a slave and said, we're going to take you down south and we're going to sell you. We don't care if you're not a slave. We know you're not a slave. You can play that little fiddle, man, better than we can. We know you educated, but you better shut up. Your name is now going to be Toby. Literally. Gave him a name. Told him what he was going to be. Ladies and gentlemen, not because of his skin color. Not because of his skin color, but because they could sell him as a slave. Again, slavery had nothing to do with race. Slavery had everything to do with control. If you don't believe me, go back and watch The Matrix. That's what The Matrix is all about. It's all about slavery. Individuals being enslaved to the Matrix. Let me let this idiot talk.
But putting aside the injustice of monetary reparations from current taxpayers for the sins of a small subset of Americans for many.
Whoa. And you're going to, I wish I could have let that play. See, holding the son accountable for the sins of the father, that's what they're doing. Because he's doing religion right now. And what you guys don't understand, Ezekiel, the 18th chapter, says that a son may not be held accountable for the sins of his father. So a small segment holding the nation, taxpayers, accountable for a small segment of America. Small. Ladies and gentlemen, over 10 million slaves traded in the slave trade. Over 10 million. But they say it was small. United States became a great nation as a result of its sponsoring slavery. Hold on. Did you just hear me say that the United States sponsored slavery? Just like they sponsor child sex labor and trade to this very day. You see how they support child labor in other countries. That's how Walmart became Walmart. Ladies and gentlemen, y'all are not playing any games when you're looking at this. Open your eyes and quit playing peekaboo. Quit playing hide and seek. You cannot bury your head in the sand. You all knew what was going on. and you remain silent. You continue to go to those stores. You continue to buy. You failed to speak up. I'm not telling you to go out there and protest. How dare you? I don't get involved in protests, people. Again, I am neutral to such stupidity. Protests do not work. I don't care if it's in the Constitution, the right to peacefully assemble. That wasn't talking about protests. Now, yes, they were saying you had the right to assemble and argue and protest and all that, knock yourself out. But the peaceful assembly was for religion. You don't believe me? Look at where it's categorized at. In England, people were not allowed to meet together and talk about the Bible. That's why the Pilgrims came here in the first place. I know, you were told the story about this and about that. That was a lie. The people who paid to get on that boat with that idiot, these were individuals who were escaping religious persecution. That's why they made it that everyone got to practice religion. That's why it was one of the first things, and the right to peacefully assemble. That's why they used the word peace. Shh, don't tell nobody. It's a secret. 1 second.
Many generations ago. Let me finish. The fair distribution of reparations would be nearly impossible once one considers the complexity of the American struggle to abolish slavery. Just consider this, okay? There are tens of millions of today's non-African Americans who are descended from people who arrived in the country, of course, after slavery ended.
Oh, did you hear what he just said? Plenty of people who are non-African American. Plenty of people who are non-African American. Did you hear what this man just said? So to be African American, that means you're a descendant of slaves. Hold on now. That's why the bill says you have to have identified yourself over the past 12 years, pay attention, as being African American. Ladies and gentlemen, I am not from Africa. I'm an American. I am from this land. This land is your land, and this land is mine. No, you better believe I ain't singing that stupid song. Ladies and gentlemen, I am from this land that is known as North America. I am not African American. You bring that term to me and you'll get an argument from me. Like I said, I was listening to Democracy Now! There was this young lady, she was an artist, talking about how was it Bob Marley? Bob Marley was somebody she listened to and everything. She was going to listen to him and go to his concert. And her sister said, really? Who is he? And she told her sister who Bob Marley was. And then she told her sister how good Bob Marley was and what Bob Marley did this and Bob Marley did that. And she says, what country is he from? She says, oh, he's an African American. And her sister said to her, what? That's impossible. And she says, what do you mean? Well, how can you be from Africa and America at the same time? Those are two different continents. And as I said before, the moment I heard that, out of the mouth of babes, that was over 15 years ago. I've not allowed anybody to refer to me as no stupid African American from that point on. You don't get to label me. I don't allow it. This man just made this about race. The other one made it about race. They've made this about race, and it's not about race. It's about slavery. Slavery had nothing to do with race. Slavery was all about control. Remember, that's what slavery is. Exercising control over another person. If you don't believe me, go and look at the definition. Slavery has always been about control. If you go and look at Roots, they had to get them to submit. When you go into jail, when you go into prison, they want to talk about how you become their property because you have voluntarily subjected yourself to servitude. And as I told everybody, I've never been a slave of any man, and I never will. I could not have lived, as I told the idiot I spoke to today, during that era, because there is no way in the world I would have permitted or allowed them to exercise that type of authority. They would have killed me. I give you my word on that, because I would not have gone along quietly. Sorry, it's just my personality. could not have allowed it, could not have stood for it. That's why I'm voicing my opinion now, because although I didn't participate, I didn't even know this junk was going on. I voice my opinion because I can see right through the stupidity talking about racism. The whole thing that they want you to focus on is racism. Reparations is not for racism. Reparations is for making money off of my ancestor and making a profit and not compensating my ancestor. Because had they been compensated, my life, according to reality, would have been better. My stature would have been better. My ability to maneuver in society would have been better. No, don't get me wrong. I did all right with the aid of my God, but I'm speaking as if I was everyone else who is a descendant of slaves. Is anybody else speaking on their behalf? You better believe they're not. Well, they got this professor and that professor. You mean these nutty professors who are a part of this elite class of individuals? The learned did.
And therefore they can't be held responsible for its legacy. More tens of millions are descended from people in both the North and South who didn't own slaves or who were descended from white people who fought in the Civil War on the Union side.
Aw, did you hear him? Say, look, there are a lot of people who didn't even own slaves. They didn't even participate in that. They were in the North. Ladies and gentlemen, let me say this again. The United States as a country condoned slavery. That's why it was allowed in the South in the first place. They got rid of it in the North. Remember, they got rid of it in the North. Wait, hold on. They got rid of it in the North. But it existed in the North too. Look at the, what was it, the Northwest Passage, and then you have, that Ohio River thing, and then you had anybody who was below this line and that line was considered blah, 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 blah. Ooh, people who are of African descent are only 3/5 of a man. That's right, because we the Supreme Court, and we get to dictate who is and who is not a man. Ladies and gentlemen, you know that case has never been overturned? Go back and look at Dred Scott. That case still exists today. They have never overturned it. Now, why is it that the Supreme Court made such stupidity and have not overturned it? Because this country will not admit slavery was wrong. They admit that there were some flaws and there were some mistakes and it's a blight on our history and all that, but they will never say we were wrong. Why? Because that equates to liability. Sorry, go talk to lawyers. They'll tell you.
Indeed, only a small percentage of the total American population were slave owners. For the aforementioned reasons and many others, such an approach has been widely unpopular, at least in our recent history. In the 1970s, civil rights organizations openly rejected the idea of reparations, which the NAACP's assistant director himself called, quote, an illogical, diversionary, and paltry way out for guilt-ridden whites, unquote. Bayard Rustin, who organized the 1963 March on Washington and was one of Martin Luther King Jr.'s closest advisors, described the concept as, quote, a ridiculous idea, unquote.
He's only mentioned 4 people so far, at least 4 people, in his speech. 10 million slaves, at least. And he mentions 4 people. Then he talks about the NAACP. Ladies and gentlemen, if only you knew who actually runs the NAACP, how well controlled they are, how well the CIA stepped in and got rid of all the leaders. The same thing with the Pink Panthers, the Black Panthers, how they came in and changed the leadership. And then because they say something, they speak for everyone. 4 people, ladies and gentlemen. Let me do this because they lie to people telling everybody that the government, the United States government, promised reparations. No, they did not. Sherman, the general who promised reparations to the black slaves if they were to come and be a part of the army, and if they won, well, that was the Southern Army. Ladies and gentlemen, the South lost. He didn't have the authority to make such an offer to the people. He was just a military commander. He wasn't Congress. He wasn't the president. He did not have the executive authority to do so. He did not have the legislative authority to offer people 40 acres and a mule. 40 acres and a mule was never the law. You'll hear people talk about it, but you'll never see it in law. Yes, there are some bills that were introduced that talked about some 40 acres and a mule, but never the promise of government. Never. It doesn't matter about Adams coming in and becoming president after Lincoln and all this other stupid stuff. That had nothing to do with it. They were never going to let the slaves, former slaves, own property. Because they were property. How can property own property? Some of y'all are going to pay attention to what I just said. Then you're going to go back to that time period and you're going to realize how difficult it was for somebody who was a former slave to own property. Go back. How can property own property? That's like my dog owning property. They were never going to let it happen, ladies and gentlemen. Hold on one second.
Barack Obama opposed reparations when he ran for president in 2008. And
hold on. Now, Barack Obama speaks for all the people of color in the world, especially in the United States, because he was the president of the United States and he speaks for everybody. Didn't you guys know that that's what they were going to do? You notice that Barack Obama did not do a single thing for individuals who were descendants of former slaves. And why would he? Look at where he's a descendant from. His father from Kenya. Barack Obama had no ties to former slaves. So why in the world, his mama being Caucasian, why in the world would Barack Obama care about descendants of former slaves? I told you all from the very beginning, a person who is not a descendant of former slaves have no clue as to what descendants of former slaves go through. Yes, they might experience a little discrimination, but it is not the same. It never will be, because they're not in the same boat, although society wants us to believe that they are. Hold on.
And Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders did as well 8 years later. In addition to all this, here in the Judiciary Committee, we have an obligation to acknowledge that any monetary reparations that might be recommended by the commission created by H.R. 40 would almost certainly be unconstitutional on their face. The reason for that, listen, wait a minute. The reason for that is a legal question. See, the legal question is the federal government can't constitutionally provide compensation today to a specific racial group because other members of that group...
Hold on. Cannot provide compensation today for a specific racial group. Did you see that? I told you. They're making it about race. It has nothing to do with race. It has everything to do with slavery and the profit-making, the profiteering of slavery, and how slavery was wrong. It was unconstitutional at the time it was permitted, and how the government sanctioned slavery. Unlawful and illegal.
Maybe several generations ago, were discriminated against and treated inhumanely. According to the U.S. Supreme Court, they would refer to that as an unconstitutional racial preference. See, the holding of the 1995 case, Richmond v. G.A. Cross and Company, is that racial set-asides and other entitlements are only constitutionally permissible to remedy the present effects of the government's own widespread and recent discrimination. And the federal government is not allowed to provide race-based remedies that are, quote, ageless in their reach into the past and timeless in their ability to affect the future.
Now, do you understand? It's not about race, but even he's focusing on a Supreme Court case that focused on race. It has nothing to do with race. These are not race-based, solutions. It has nothing to do with race. It has everything to do with descendants of slaves, how the government and these corporations that still exist today profited off of slaves. The corporations that you see are too big to fail have all grown rich and remain in power as a result of slavery. The banks that are too big to fail have all supported and backed slavery. This is about slavery. This is not about race. This is all about treating people as chattel. against their will in violation of the so-called delegation of authority.
The future, unquote. Now listen, I get it. I've read the scholarship. I know that some proponents of this legislation believe that the very discussion of reparations itself would be cathartic for our nation. But we have to ask if discussions can result in justice today. They certainly probably won't provide consensus. Instead, many people of good conscience believe they'll distract from the many persistent causes of current racial disparities. They certainly exist. The despicable racism of America's past is part of that, as Mr. Coates, for example, has documented in a very compelling way, but so are other social and cultural dynamics which are themselves often negatively influenced by well-intended government policies. Let us be clear today. Racism violates the most fundamental principles of our great nation.
As I keep highlighting, racism and slavery are not the same thing. That's what they have done, ladies and gentlemen. They've changed the subject matter. They've changed the topic of conversation. As one of Jehovah's Witnesses, and you heard me say it, I'll say it again. I am one of Jehovah's Witnesses. 1984, they came out with a publication called Reasoning with the Scriptures. There was a segment in it that said topic of conversation. And then we had conversation stoppers. In that book, it was how to stop individuals from attempting to change the conversation. I'm always bringing people back to the subject matter of the conversation since that publication, because that taught me how to keep the conversation focused. I made a complaint today because I was dealing with a state agency. I filed for an appeal. They ignored me. I told them what my appeal was about. They ignored me. Now that I got my appeal, we had a hearing this morning, and I reiterated to them that this is my right. This is my due process right, and I'm appealing based upon your colleagues not doing their job and lying about it. Oh no, somebody is going to have something done. And I'm calling those colleagues because they had to postpone the hearing. I said, so when we reschedule this hearing, I'm calling those colleagues to testify, because I have that right to call witnesses. What I'm trying to say in a nutshell, ladies and gentlemen, I even told them I know they're going to try to retaliate against me, because I'm going to use their system to my advantage. See, that's what racism allows me to do. What I'm trying to say, ladies and gentlemen, is I just listened to this tonight. I only got a little bit further than this, because that's when he's going to start talking about his so-called African-American abandoned child that he rescued from the street. Ladies and gentlemen, you're going to hear him use phrases like that he rescued this person, and that this child that he rescued from the street that grew up in his house from the age of 14, he's already a teenager. That means he stayed in your house at least 4 years. 14 to 18. That's not enough time, son. But he says he experienced racism with his son. Really? You experienced racism? How did you experience racism? You've never been subject to it. Well, I watched my son go through. You watched him go through it. You did not experience it with him. You cannot. You cannot see it from the perspective. I don't care how well you try.
And it breaks the heart of our just and loving God. The central idea of America, what has been called as our foundational creed, is that we boldly declare the self-evident truths that all men are created equal, and that we are thus endowed.
Ladies and gentlemen, he's going to do all that Declaration of Independence thing. I've said it to you before, I'll say it again. All men are not created equal. Go back and look at Genesis, the first chapter. Look at verse number 26, 27, and 28. And then look at the second chapter, verse number 7. And you'll see that only one man was created. Eve, because she was created from Adam, was procreated. And because we are created from them, are procreated. All men are not created equal. Just that simple. That statement, when it was made, was a disingenuous at best statement, because the individuals at the time who wrote that were the so-called businessmen. They were not the people. Declaration of Independence was not written by the people. It was written by the businessmen who came here.
Endowed by our Creator with the same inalienable rights. Because each of us is made in the image of God. Every single person.
Go back and read the Declaration. It's not inalienable. It's unalienable rights.
Person has inestimable dignity and value, and our value is not related in any way to the color of our skin, what neighborhood we live in, our intelligence, or our abilities. Our value is inherent because it is given to us by our Creator. Many of my colleagues
Says our value is not as a result of the color of our skin. No, he's absolutely right. Our value is not because of the color of our skin, because slavery, their value was because of their genetics. If you don't believe me, look, ladies and gentlemen, we all know that, and I'm sorry, but I got to say it, and I hate saying it because it sounds like I'm favoring one over the other, but African Americans tend to be the better athletes when it comes to muscle sports, running, jumping, that type of thing. Oh no, such and such won the pole vault. Oh, God, you people are so ignorant. Those who make stupid comments like that. The comment, so that you'll understand where I'm coming from, is that blacks were bred for this. They were bred to be slaves. Excuse me? You guys have heard the statement before. I'm not the person that made it up. They picked them because of their physique, both the men and the women. They tried making the Indians slave, and it didn't work. They tried making Hispanics from Mexico slaves, and it didn't work. They tried making Asian slaves, and it didn't work. Do your research and your history and understand that what I just said is not made up out of my own mind. Slavery was intentional. They sought, they went, they looked, and they took advantage. Remember, slavery is all about control.
Colleagues in this committee may not be aware that in addition to our 4 children still at home, my wife Kelly and I actually have a much older son who happens to be African American.
Woo! Got a son who happens to be African American. That makes him able to understand where they're coming from.
We took custody of Michael and made him part of our family 22 years ago when we were just newlyweds, and Michael was just 14 and out on the streets and nowhere to go and on a very dangerous path.
On the streets, nowhere to go, and he was on that path of danger. He was living in a ghetto.
Michael's grown now. He has his own young family. He turns 36 years old next week, and he's a loving dad to 4 precious children of his own. God's been good to us, and he's a success story. I mention that today for one reason. I personally...
Wait, did you hear that racist comment he just made? He said because Michael grew up in his household, he's a success story. You don't know. He said he was on a dangerous path. If he had left him out there on them streets, he was on a dangerous path. And some of you are going to say, but yeah, he was saying, but no, he didn't mean it. Shut up. Because he said, he mentions it today to point out that he is a success story. He's a success story because I helped him. I groomed him. I trained him. I taught him. I raised him. Ladies and gentlemen, notice how he highlighted his children, that he has these adorable children. All black children are adorable when they're young. That's why they pat them on their little heads. Oh, you're so adorable.
Personally know the challenge that he has faced early in his life. I have walked with him through discrimination that he's had to endure over the years and the hurdles he's sometimes faced. I know all this, but I was with him.
He was with him. Hooey! That man, that makes it all the difference. Hey, we just might as well throw the towel in because he was with them. He was with them. He understood everything that was going on because he was with them.
I asked Michael this weekend what he thinks about the idea of reparations.
Wait, Michael, 36 years old. The one that he took off the street, that's a success story. Let's get his opinion. He's an expert. 1 second. Hey, I'm not talking about Michael. I don't know Michael. I don't know anything about Michael. I don't know how Michael grew up, where he grew up, why he grew up. I have no idea. But what I do know is that the fact that this idiot is using him as an example, something ain't right. What is the song? Something just ain't right. Something ain't right, y'all. Hold on.
In a very thoughtful way, he explained his opposition, and it reminded me of something that Harvard history professor Stephen Thurston.
We're going to get past this Stephen Thurston thing. We're going to get to his son, because he said his son spoke against reparations. Yeah, I'm going, because right here, this is the end of his speech.
And I look forward to hearing from all of our witnesses. Thank you again. I yield back.
See? All right. Let me get past him, ladies and gentlemen, and let me just go ahead and say this because it needs to be said. We're going to go just shy of an hour. I got about 3 more minutes before I shut this video off. The reason why I pointed this out, because reparations, ladies and gentlemen, has nothing, I need you all to pay attention, to do with slavery. Nobody's asking to be reparated for slavery, are they? Wrong! Reparation and slavery go hand in hand. Every other country that's had it has offered reparations. The United States, the only one that didn't. The apartheid, reparations. Go back and pay attention. It's racism that nobody's asking anybody for money for racism. Okay? Reparation and racism are not the same thing. And anybody who believes that they do, and these professors that have allowed this to go on, you all need to see that you're being played. They play these professors and quote these professors because these professors are doing what they want them to do. You don't get to become a professor in Harvard without owing somebody a favor. Don't take my word for it. You don't get to be sitting up here being a senator or a commissioner or this or that without owing somebody a favor. You guys must really understand. First, I would never have done it because I'm one of Jehovah's Witnesses. I've been offered an opportunity in the past when I was really young of being part of the so-called Masons. I don't think so. I had a friend whose father was a Mason, and he had his son come talk to me about it. I knew who they were at the time. I'm only 19 years old. I understood who they were. But I definitely didn't want to be a part of them because I understood who controlled them. Not just Masons. Maxine Waters wanted to groom me for being a congressman or a judge. I don't think so. Didn't want to get involved in anybody's politics because I'm one of Jehovah's Witnesses. We do not vote, and she knew that. Don't care how much money they can offer. That's what the Masons promised, was money. I don't care about no stupid money, and nobody ever got that with me. This is not about favors. Ladies and gentlemen, reparations has nothing to do with racism. Do not let these fools change the subject. Reparations has everything to do with slavery. Slavery was wrong in all of its forms. Yes, the Israelites had slaves. Yes, other nations had slaves. That doesn't make it right. Remember, the Israelites, even if they did have a slave, they must have released them after 7 years. And if the slave agreed to staying with the master, then he needed to have his ear pierced with an ewe. Why? Because that was to show that he volunteered to be a slave. And he would become that person's property for the rest of his life. And yes, many people chose that because their slave owners were not like the slave owners of the 1800s. I hope that this information here gives you a different perspective and don't allow you to be distracted by the side stories and the side talk. Ladies and gentlemen, stop letting them tell you the narrative. Stop letting them tell you the subject matter. If it's about slavery, then you do your research on slavery. It's about reparations, then you do your research about reparations. Learn what this stuff is. Hey, I gotta go. Said I was gonna keep it under an hour.